Welcome back to my channel. Today I have brought a time travel movie for you, the story of which is very confusing. The Predestination movie is filled with suspense from the first scene to the last scene. What happens in the movie cannot be understood by watching it just once. If you have also seen this movie and didn't understand its story, then this video is for you. This movie uses the concept of the predestination paradox. I will also explain this paradox. But first, let's start with the story of the movie. At the beginning of the movie, we see the year 1975. A man wearing a hat enters a public building in New York City in 1975. There was a bomb there that he had to deactivate. He starts defusing it. But during this time, he senses someone's presence. A shootout begins between them, and the time to defuse the bomb runs out, causing it to explode. As a result of the explosion, the man's face gets badly burned. He sees another man approaching him, who comes up to him and gives him his violin case. The violin case was actually a time machine, which the man uses to travel back to his time in 1992, from where he had time traveled to 1975 in order to prevent the bomb blast. Before moving forward with the story, it is important to know that the four main characters we see in this movie are Jane, John, Barkeeper, and the Fizzle Bomber. These four people are actually the same person, from different times, and they look different at different times. Why and how did this happen? You will understand as the story unfolds. Now, the man with the cap, whose face was burned, has returned to his time. In 1975, when he went to defuse the bomb, there were three people. One was the man with the cap, John. The second was the Fizzle Bomber, who had planted the bomb, and the third was the man who had directed the time machine towards John. He was called Barkeeper. These three people are all the same, who have time traveled from different times and come together at this time. Why did they all come to this place from different times by time traveling? It is still confusing, but as the story progresses, you will understand why they did this. Before moving forward with the story, let me explain the predestination paradox. The predestination paradox is a unique time travel paradox in which the person who time travels gets stuck in a closed loop with no starting or ending point. Whatever event happens in this paradox is the cause of a future event. This means that the person does not even realize where it all started. Later on, the action that happens in the future may have already happened, or the action in the past was actually the starting point. And no matter what the time traveler does, he cannot change any upcoming event. In other words, changing history is impossible. Once something has happened, you cannot go back in time and change it. Even if you try, you will eventually realize that you have become the cause of that event happening, but you can't stop it. This means you cannot go back in time to stop your birth or prevent a war. Let's now return to the story. So, John returns from 1975 to his time in 1992. His face was completely burned, so he undergoes plastic surgery and is given a completely new face. Now his appearance has changed. John works for an organization called the Temporal Bureau, which uses time machines to go into the past and stop horrific events that have already occurred. John's mission was to stop the bomb explosion in 1975 and kill the Fizzle Bomber, but despite his efforts, he failed to prevent it. Now with his new face, his new name is Barkeeper. Barkeeper means the owner of a bar, or someone who serves drinks at a bar. Now Barkeeper goes on a mission in 1970. A man comes into the bar, who is actually John in his younger form. He recognizes John, but John doesn't recognize Barkeeper because his face and voice have changed. They start talking. Young John tells Barkeeper that he is the author of a book called Unmarried Mother. He begins to tell his story that he was once an unfortunate girl. He didn't know who his parents were because they had abandoned him outside an orphanage. It was 1945. There, his name was given as Jane. In the orphanage, every child was adopted, but no one adopted Jane. Jane feels that she is more powerful than ordinary girls. When Jane becomes completely hopeless, she joins the Space Corps program. She works very well there, but is eventually kicked out. They tell her that she is being disqualified due to a fight with another girl, but that isn't the real reason. Jane had a condition called psychosis. This is a mental condition in which a person's thinking is no longer under their control. She couldn't tell if what was happening around her was real or fake. She became confused about what was real and what was fake, leading to depression. Looking at it, everything in this world is very complex. As science makes new inventions, things like multiple universes, time illusions, black holes, etc., are proving to be true. After being expelled from the Space Corps, Jane joins a night school. There she meets a stranger. They fall in love, and one night, they spend time alone together. But one day, the stranger tells her that he has to leave. He leaves, and Jane is once again left alone and becomes sad. A few days later, she finds out that she is pregnant. When the time for delivery comes, there are complications in the hospital, but she gives birth to a healthy baby girl. The doctors tell her that complications arose during delivery because your physiology is different from that of regular people. You had fully developed male and female organs. When complications arose during delivery, we had to remove your female organ. Now, you only have male organs left. This means you are no longer female, but male. Then she finds out that someone has stolen her baby from the hospital. She tries very hard, but she cannot find her baby. Eventually, she returns home. Now she tries to live as a man. She changes her name from Jane to John. Now she is John. When John tells Barkeeper his story at the bar, he thinks that Barkeeper won't believe his story, but Barkeeper says, "I believe you." Because Barkeeper is actually John, who traveled from the future to this time through time travel. The barkeeper tells John, "I will take you to the stranger who ruined your life. I will give you a chance to kill him." Now, both time travel to the place where Jane used to go to night school. John, armed with a gun, starts waiting for the stranger at the location, but he encounters the female version of his old self, Jane. Upon seeing her in her female form, he falls in love with her. They start talking to each other. John realizes that the stranger he had come to kill was none other than himself. It was John who had traveled from the future to meet Jane in the past, formed a relationship with her, and then left her. Here, we can see a loop. No one can decide which event came first. Now, while John and Jane are meeting, the barkeeper leaves them there and travels through the time machine to 1975. He goes to the place where the Fizzle Bomber is planting the bomb. A fight ensues between them, but the Fizzle Bomber knocks John unconscious. When John regains consciousness, he sees himself burning. His face is horribly burned. The barkeeper helps him return to his time in 1992, and the three of them leave. Barkeeper then travels to the hospital in 1963, the time when Jane gave birth to the baby. There he meets Mr. Robertson, the doctor who had told Jane how she went from female to male. Mr. Robertson also has a time machine. It is revealed here that he is the head of the Temporal Bureau, the same bureau that Barkeeper works for. The story moves forward as Barkeeper takes the baby and travels to 1945. He goes to an orphanage and leaves the baby there, meaning the baby has now been sent back in time, several years before it was born. The baby, born in 1963, is now in an orphanage in 1945. This shows us the predestination paradox. John and Jane are the same person, and the baby born from their relationship is also them. John traveled through time, came to the past, and formed a relationship with his female version, giving birth to himself. Then he took himself and left the baby in the orphanage to grow up there. We can't say which event in this loop came first, whether it was the baby Jane being born or John forming a relationship with Jane in the past to give birth to himself. After leaving the baby in the orphanage, Barkeeper returns to 1963, where John and Jane are in love. John tells Jane that he's coming soon. Then he goes to Barkeeper, who takes him back to his time in 1985. Barkeeper leaves him there and leaves an audio recording so that John can learn the truth and know what to do next. John then meets Mr. Robertson, travels through time, and goes to 1975. He wants to retire. 1975 is the year when the horrific bombing incident occurred, killing over 10,000 people. Barkeeper travels to that year. just a few days before the explosion. By 1985, John has recovered from the shock. Thanks to the information in Barkeeper's audio, he learns the whole truth and becomes a temporal agent. By 1992, he is an expert temporal agent. He then suits up and travels through time to 1975 to defuse the bomb planted by the Fizzle Bomber. Due to the movement of the Fizzle Bomber, John senses someone is there, and a gunfight ensues between them. This is the starting scene of the movie, which we are now revisiting in the story. As the time to defuse the bomb runs out, the bomb explodes, and John's face is badly burned. Barkeeper helps him so that he can return to his time. Now, we see a flashback from a few days ago when Barkeeper had reached 1975 to live a retired life. He tries to deactivate his time machine completely, but every time he encounters an error and fails. He starts checking the files and finds that Robertson has left him a clue to catch the Fizzle Bomber. Using this clue, Barkeeper discovers the Fizzle Bomber's location and goes there to catch him. When he arrives, he is shocked to discover that the Fizzle Bomber is actually his own future version. Barkeeper stops in his tracks. His future version, now named the Fizzle Bomber, starts talking to him. From his words, it seems like he has become a psycho, likely due to repeated time traveling and an abnormal life. Barkeeper listens to his words, confused and shocked at how he has become like this. During this conversation, Barkeeper shoots the Fizzle Bomber, which is his mission. Returning to his life, Barkeeper starts living his retired life. He never told Robertson about his time machine, and the movie ends here. Friends, after watching the movie and listening to this explanation, you must have understood a lot about this movie. However, there are still many questions that keep coming to mind. The first question is, after Barkeeper kills the Fizzle Bomber and starts living his retirement life, will he go to the future and become the Fizzle Bomber himself, and why? After killing the Fizzle Bomber, John does not tell his organization about the time machine, which is still working. This means he can still travel through time, and he will keep traveling through time. Time traveling also affects the time traveler's mind, and seeing strange events and unpredictable incidents makes the time traveler become a psycho. Because of time traveling, Barkeeper's mind will also deteriorate, and he will become the Fizzle Bomber. This movie is based on the predestination paradox, meaning no matter what the time traveler does, he cannot stop the event that has already occurred. If he tries to stop it, he will actually help the event happen and become a part of it, but he won't be able to stop it, just like John couldn't stop the bomb blast and became a part of the story. The second question is, could the bomb blast in New York have been stopped? As we know in the predestination paradox, we cannot stop any incident. If we try to stop it, we will become a part of it. So how could the bomb blast have been stopped after killing the Fizzle Bomber? The blast was bound to happen. If the Fizzle Bomber died, then his younger version or his form from another time would come and set off the blast. The third question is, were these the only 4 versions of John, or were there others? Friends, in this story, we are shown 4 versions which came from 4 different times. However, because John had the time machine, there must have been other versions of John from different times. Just like after Barkeeper, we saw the Fizzle Bomber. After Barkeeper's retirement, his life became very different and secretive, and he traveled through time according to his own will. I don't think he just traveled through time to stop the bomb blast. He must have traveled to change his life so that what happened to him wouldn't happen again, but unfortunately, whatever was meant to happen kept happening, and he became a part of it, creating his own different versions. I don't think there will be a next part of this movie in the near future. Because if there is, it will definitely explain some things, but it will also ruin the suspense of the story. Fans of the predestination paradox may want to know the starting point of the story and how everything happened, but they probably don't want the next part of the movie to come. Fans will prefer to watch this movie again and again in this suspense. So, friends, that's all for today's video. Hope you liked this video. If you did, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.